Rank 7s have generally been pretty hard to go into in Yu-Gi-Oh!, mostly because level 7s haven't been that common throughout the game's history. In this video, we're going to go over the best monsters from this underutilized toolbox. Starting us off at number 10, we have Mermail Abyssgaios. This is a rank 7 water monster with 2800 attack, requiring 2 level 7 water monsters. While it has Xyz materials, level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack. It can also, as a quick effect, detach material to negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls with less attack than its cards until the end of the turn. Abyssgaios makes this list as the first rank 7 to actually be somewhat relevant in the game's history. This monster was a formidable boss monster for its time. A quick effect negation like this was a premium back then. Being able to interrupt an opponent's starter was something that was usually reserved to either hand traps or actual traps back then. Abyssgaios couldn't really be played in other decks, as it required both an uncommon level and attribute as material, but it fitted perfectly in its archetype. Mermail Abyssgaios and Abyssmegalo are the archetype's best extenders, as they can both special summon themselves by sending water monsters from the hand to the graveyard, which can trigger the graveyard effects of many of the archetype's graveyard effects, and both search more cards on summon. This made them great for both extending as well as playing into boards, as they can also pitch the Atlanteans to destroy your opponent's cards. Outside of Mermails, the only other deck which was able to use this card was Dragon Rulers, since they could overlay 2 titles for it, though it came at way less than pretty much every other rank 7 they had access to at the time. Either way, even if it's only been really good in a single deck ever, the impact Mermails had earns it at least number 10 spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Digital Bug Rhinosebus. This Xyz monster can be made with 2 or more level 7 light insect type monsters, but it also can be Xyz summoned by detaching 2 materials and ranking up on top of a rank 5 or 6 insect type Xyz instead. It does piercing battle damage, and it can also, as a quick effect, detach material to destroy the face-up monster opponent controls with the highest defense. Now, despite having a quite decent effect, Rhinosebus has never really seen play the TCG, and it's just a tad bit too difficult to bring out. Being a discount Zodiac Trident is good and all, but there's never really been a really good way to bring it out for most decks. Summoning it normally requires 2 level 7 light insects, a stat line which no main deck monster has, and the only generic way to rank into it is within Zector Exabeetle. While you could go into that and rank up into Rhinosebus for a pop, there has never really been any deck which would rather do that than say a Heretic Dragon of Autumn to bring out a dragon from the deck, or Beatrice to foolish any card instead. However, in Duel Links, this line has been one of the most powerful things you could go into during your first turn. The first deck which abused Rhinosebus was Gagaguz, one of Duel Links' many tier 0 threats over the years. Despite being focused mainly level 4 monsters, they could use Gagaguz's sister to make their monsters into level 6, then go into Exabeetle into Rhinosebus. Being able to end on a quick effect pop was so strong that this card had to be put on their semi-limited list, which only lets you play 2 cards from their total in your deck, where it still resides to this day. And coming in at number 8, we have number 89, Diablosis the Mind Hacker. This is a dark psychic rank 7 Xyz with generic materials. It can detach material from itself to look at your opponent's extra deck and then banish a card from it face down. If it destroys something by battle, it gets to target and banish face down a card from your opponent's graveyard at the end of the battle phase. And lastly, if a card is banished face down, it can banish cards on top of your opponent's deck face down equal to the number of their banished face down cards. Diablosis is a very interesting monster with a really unique bundle of effects. Extra deck disruption is pretty rare to come by, and it can be absolutely devastating if your opponent only plays 1 copy of their main extra deck monsters, such as Tearlament Kit Kalos. Even if a single banish cannot shut down their strategy entirely, you still get benefits of having full information of not only what the deck your opponent is playing, but also what kinds of techs they might have to beat yours. Diablosis hasn't really seen much play for the biggest part of its lifespan, as not only weren't there really any decks where spammed enough rank 7s to make this as a consideration, but also because it was only available as a prize card for several years. Nowadays, this card is said to be one of the staples in Kashtira decks, as it provides several advantages to the strategy. Not only can it be used to get rid of the most common out of their board, Zeus, the fact that it banishes cards face down means that it can be used to lock your opponent's board with Kashtira Shangri-La. The spaceship can lock up one of your opponent's monster or spell and trap card zones from being used each time a card they owned is banished face down, and this is not a once per turn. When used together with Diablosis, Shangri-La can lock out multiple zones in a single turn, working towards the deck's goal of locking your opponent out entirely. And coming in at number 7, we have Dark Armed, the Dragon of Annihilation. This Dark Dragon rank 7 can be made with 2 or more level 7 monsters. However, if you have exactly 5 darks in your graveyard, it can also be ranked up on top of a level 5 or higher Dark Dragon monster you control. It has the effect to detach material from itself to target and pop a card your opponent controls, and then banish 1 card from your graveyard. However, it cannot attack the turn this effect is activated. This retrained Dark Armed Dragon borrows heavily from the original, as it can also summon itself within a certain number of darks in the graveyard, and it also packs a not once per turn destruction effect. Unfortunately, that's where the similarities ends, as this card hasn't been nearly as relevant as Dad was. This monster still has the niche of being the most powerful option for generic removal in the rank 7 pool though, as it'll give you at least 2 pops if made with the bare minimum of 2 level 7 monsters. Like a lot of other cards in this list, Dark Arm is shaped to be a staple in Kashtira strategies, as they're kind of the best deck at spamming level 7s ever released. However, this card also has a small history for itself as a tech in Dragon Link. These decks are made up almost entirely of Dark Dragons and have access to amazing tools to manipulate their graveyards, such as Chaos Ruler the Chaotic Magical Dragon, back when that was still legal. This led to some decks playing Dark Arm just for its alternate summon condition, as it could be summoned on top of Noctovision or a spent Borreload Savage Dragon, and then pop away your opponent's back row before being linked off into a Borrelsword Dragon for game. Still, despite being a dad from the extra deck and having 2 summoning conditions, they were both just awkward enough to not make it such a big player into any metagame so far. And at number 6, we have Orea the Sylvan High Arbiter. This is a dark plant monster with 2800 attack and can be made with any 2 level 7s. Once per turn, it can send a plant monster from your hand or field to the graveyard to let you look at the top card of your deck equal to that monster's level, and then you get to rearrange it however you want. It can also detach material to excavate up to 3 cards from the top of your deck and send any excavated plants to the graveyard, and then you get to bounce that many cards from the field. Orea has to be one of the most unique combo enablers in the game. Usually the best extra deck extenders are monsters that either spam special summons or give you a lot of card advantage. However, Orea enables its deck by letting you stack upwards of 8 cards on the top of your deck by sending a high level Sylvan. This is great because Sylvans are entirely centered around excavating cards from the top of your deck, having tons of effects to both excavate and trigger when they're excavated. You can stack Kumo Shroomro and Martial Leaf to destroy cards on the field, or even put non-engine cards like Soul Charge in just the right order so that you can draw them with Sylvan Charity. Even its effect to bounce cards in the field was great at extending your plays if set up correctly. Since it doesn't have to bounce your opponent's cards, it can be used to let you get your Miracle Fertilizer back to your hand so you can activate them again. This lets you spam the field even harder, especially if you had access to multiple fertilizers, helping you end on powerful bosses such as Felgrand and Stardust Spark Dragon. Sylvans were a very short-lived deck, being only viable for a few formats due to Soul Charge being at 3 for a short while. However, while it was around, Orea was one of the scariest rank 7s you could be going up against. And coming in at number 5, we have number 11 Big Eye. This is a generic rank 7 Dark Spellcaster monster and has a single effect where it can once per turn detach one of its materials to steal an opponent's monster forever, with the only caveat being this card cannot attack the turn it activates this effect. Big Eye makes this list as one of the main reasons why Dragon Rulers were a pseudo tier 0 deck, as well as being one of the best generic extra deck options ever released. Being able to steal an opponent's monster is something that has landed multiple cards on the ban list, as we've seen with cards like Change of Heart, even when they limit severely what you can do with the monsters like what Mind Control does. Big Eye gives you a better version of these effects, as it just takes the target forever, with the only slight downside of putting less damage on the board during the battle phase. Big Eye was often used to steal either opposing boss monsters, or your opponent's Dragon Rulers so you can hold them hostage under your own rank 7s. Even after the Dragon Rulers were hit on the ban list, there was no shortage of decks which would bend over backwards to go into Big Eye. Many archetypes like the previously mentioned Sylvan and Mermails would often pass up their own busted boss monsters to turbo into this monster instead. Unfortunately though, Big Eye's existence as a great going second Xyz has more or less been invalidated by Zeus. You're generally much better off trying to wipe away a whole board with Zeus rather than trying to remove a single monster with Big Eye. And since this card can't attack the turn it activates its effects, these 2 cards can't really be used in tandem. This monster still has its place in the few rank 7 reliant strategies out there, but its impact after it hits the board is certainly much less than it once was. And coming into number 4, we have Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger. This is a rank 7 Wind Dragon monster with 2600 attack. It can be made with any 2 level 7 Xyz monsters, but it can also be ranked up on top of rank 5 or 6 Xyz you control for free. Its only effect is that if it attacks, it inflicts piercing battle damage. Despite having such a lackluster effect, Gaia Charger has been one of the most widely played rank 7s in the game's history, all entirely due to its summoning condition. There are many more decks which go into 5s and 6s than 7s, and a good portion of them have at least considered this card. And this is because it essentially gives an extra effect to every single monster of these ranks you might have, as in addition to doing what they usually do, they also have the option to become a 2600 attack piercer. Additionally, there's always a ton of utility in being able to rank up on top of rank 5 to 6 that you've stolen from your opponent with a Mind Control, just so that it won't return to their owner during the end phase. However, both of these cases are pretty niche compared to how this card is used these days. Due to the release of Zeus, it becomes especially useful to be able to put yet another material on an Xyz, as it can be the difference between being able to use the effect of Zeus twice instead of only once. This has led pretty much every single deck which goes into these ranks to play Gaia Charger, in the same way lower decks play Downward Magician. Be it VW with Tomahawk 7, or Earth Machine with a River Stormer, any deck which goes into these 2 ranks is probably going to waste a slot on the Xyz Piercer just to power up their Zeus when going second. And coming into number 3, we have Odd Eye's Absolute Dragon. This rank 7 Water Dragon monster can be made with any 2 level 7 monsters. When an attack is declared, it can detach material from itself to negate the attack, and then you can special summon an Odd Eye's monster from your hand or graveyard. It also has a floating effect, where if this Xyz card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon an odd-eyes monster from your extra deck, except another copy of itself. Absolute Dragon Gate Pendulum deck's an amazing Xyz monster to go into, which was pretty much always worth making despite the fact it would make your pendulum monsters go to the graveyard instead of the extra deck. While its battle-related effect would rarely come up, as it's not like Utopia had been playable for its effect in forever either, its graveyard effect gave an amazing toolbox for these strategies. Meteor Burst, one of its targets, prevents your opponent from activating effects during the battle phase, which could be great for shutting down both hand traps as well as floating effects. But the most important one to go into was Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, as it bounces a monster on summon and gives you a once per turn Omni Negate, as long as you have a pendulum monster in your extra deck face up that you can shuffle back into the deck. Vortex Dragon has always been a very formidable card, and its only limitation was that you had to find a way to send your Absolute to the graveyard with something like a Sky Iris to access it. That's why this card only got stronger when Link Summoning came out, since you could just link it off and get your Negate online with little prior setup on turn 1. While Pendulum got a fairly big hit during Master Rule 4, new releases as well as minor buffs such as this helped keep the deck afloat for years more. And coming in number 2, we have Mecha Phantom Beast Dracossack. This Wind Machine Xyz can once per turn detach material of himself to special summon 2 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, those being level 3 Wind Machines with no stats. It cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects while you control a token, and once per turn, it can tribute a Mecha Phantom Beast monster to pop a card in the field, but it cannot attack the turn it activates this effect. This is the second of the rank 7s which saw such a big role in why Dragon Rulers were a pseudo tier 0 deck. But differently from Big Eye, this one managed to have a much bigger impact on the game. This card was the best monster you could be ending on back in the day, as it was a huge body, cannot be destroyed while it has tokens up, which can make 2 of them every turn, and if it's not dealt with, it's also removal. The stickiness of this card is part of the reason why Big Eye was also so relevant back then, as it was one of the best ways to deal with an opposing Dracossack because you could just take it for yourself. Even after the Dragon rules were all removed from the meta through the ban list, this was still a powerful rank 7 in several more strategies, and was even part of the reason Harpies were meta ones due to having an easy line to access Dracossack on turn 1. What sets Dracossack apart from other rank 7s is how well it's aged, as it also happens to be a token generator, which goes along perfectly with Link Summoning. Even better, its tokens are both level 3, which means they can be used to go into Cherubini, which can dump any level 3 from your deck to the graveyard. This has been abused in many ways, such as sending Enchantress to go into the Adventure Engine, and more recently in the OCG, used to send King of the Swamp to enable tier limit plays. All of this on top of also being a pretty decent Zeus enabler, has made Dracossack be relevant a ton of times throughout the game's history. And finally, at number 1, we have Kashtira Arise-Heart. This is a rank 7 Dark Machine monster with 3000 attack and defense, and can be made with 3 level 7 monsters. However, it can also be Xyz summoned on top of any Kashtira monster if Kashtira Shangri-La is activated its effect this turn. While it's on the field, any card sent to the graveyard gets banished instead, and once per chain, whenever a card is banished, it attaches a banished card to itself as a material. Once per turn as a quick effect, it can detach 3 materials from itself to target a card in the field and banish it face down. Arise-Heart is the boss monster of the Kashtira archetype, and the entire reason why it's a viable deck. This card just does everything. It's a macrocosmos, which can beat graveyard-reliant strategies such as Tearlaments on its own. It can attach banished cards to itself, which means you can recycle the Kashtira spells to trigger their effects when they're banished again and again, giving you great follow-up. It's also a Trident in both the sense that it has spot removal and can be ranked up easily on top of any of the archetype's monsters, but it banishes cards face down instead, one of the strongest forms of removal as it's almost impossible to recover face down banished cards. This card also appears beautifully with Shangri-La, as when it removes something from the field, it'll lock your opponent from yet using another one of their zones. Oftentimes, when paired with Mind Hacker, this can lock your opponent's 5 zones during their turn, preventing them from summoning monsters entirely. This card's only flaw is that it only requires a Shangri-La effect to be activated this turn, but it doesn't have to be yours. This means that other decks can play Arise-Heart in their extra deck, so that if they take control of one of your Kashtira monsters with talents, or if they play Kashtira cards, they can make your own boss monster to go for a Zeus line. The printing of this card gave Tearlaments their biggest competitor while they were still tier 0, even if they couldn't quite dethrone them, at least in the OCG. It's a floodgate which also has removal to protect itself and a huge body, enabling Kashtira basically by itself. No other archetype ever got carried as hard by a single rank 7 before, and this is why Arise-Heart is the best monster of this rank in the game right now. Alright, and that's the list. If you happen to know of any other cards you might have missed or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.
We are gonna crash. Quick, do you know how to repair the ship?
Yeah, let me put on this Pokemon TCG video by TheDuelLogs. On a Pokemon, so damage.
This has nothing to do with repairs.
I know, but in this video we learned about which cards increase the damage of Pokemon from throughout the history of the competitive Pokemon TCG. I had no idea how crucial these effects were to overcoming thresholds to get one-hit knockouts.
We are going to crash. We don't have time for this.
Wow, Stormfront Gyarados could get up to 120 damage with its energyless attack thanks to Expert Belt? No wonder that card was so powerful.